And Cusco, obviously Cusco is the biggest city in my mission. It's the most heard of. Everyone knows of Cusco. And like everyone thinks of Machu Picchu when they think of Cusco. And that's also kind of ironic because Machu Picchu is like 4 hours away from Cusco. So it still takes a while to get there. But I served there for like 7, 8 months. So I was there for quite a while. And I was able to get to know most of Cusco. And it's a pretty big place. I mean, like the city itself is big. And there's about 500,000 people that live there. It's not a lot of people, but it's a big city. And I remember getting there, and it's a lot different than being out in the outskirts of my mission because it's more industrialized, it's more civilized, I guess you could say. And there's a lot of roads, like most everything's paved, and it's a nice city. I like Cusco, and like the transportation wise, there in Cusco, you could be going in taxis, you could go in buses, you can go in convoys, which are like little, like big passenger vans where they just cram as much people in there as they can. Like sometimes they won't even shut the door all the way because there's too many people in there. You'll just be hanging on inside. But their transportation's pretty crazy. I mean, everyone drives like crazy people. I don't know how they do it, but everyone drives crazy there. And so it's kind of nerve-wracking the first few times you're on the roads there because you don't know what's going to happen. It looks like you're going to hit someone or you're going to run into their car. But you get used to it after a while. Other than that, in Cusco, where I lived, it was pretty nice. Like there's certain nicer areas, and there's little poorer areas. But mostly everyone there lives in like brick houses, and they're pretty normal, I guess. There's not really much difference. I mean, there's no carpet in Peru, so everything's hardwood or tile, I guess. Nothing that nice, but there's no carpet whatsoever. And the housing it costs, like we paid about 300 sols per companionship, which is like $100. So it's pretty cheap there. $100 a month is pretty standard for two people. Easily you can find housing for that. You could find it for even cheaper as well. Food wise, it's pretty cheap as well. Like you can get a good meal for like lunch or dinner for $1 or $2. It's really cheap in dollars. And transportation, it's not too spendy. In a taxi, it's like $1. In bus, it could be 50 cents, 25 cents. Not the same for the little combis. Everything's a lot cheaper there. And then crime-wise in Cusco, there's hardly any crime. Like throughout all my mission, like out of Peru, I'd say it's one of the safest areas is my whole mission. Like I don't think we ever ran into anyone that wanted to rob us. No one that threatened to do anything to us. We never ran into anyone like that. I don't think I've heard of any missionaries running into anyone like that. There's hardly any crime, at least towards the missionaries there in Peru. In my part of Peru that I served, there's like no crime whatsoever. So it's a pretty safe mission. You're never really too nervous to walk anywhere. Like, I mean, obviously you want to avoid dark alleyways or whatever, but as long as you're smart, you won't run into anything because it's not too dangerous like Mexico or anything. There's a ton of dogs everywhere. In every place I served, there's been a lot of dogs. I mean, I never got bit. A lot of missionaries get bit by dogs. I'd say that's the most pressing worry is getting bit by a dog in my mission. For missionaries, there was a few restaurants we'd go to in Cusco. Like every time missionaries would get together, they'd go to a few restaurants. Like there was one that was called Fuegos. It was like an American hamburger place, and you'd get just the biggest hamburgers I've ever seen. And that was like the best place to go as missionaries. You go there, it costs a little bit more, but you get this ginormous hamburger. So everyone would go to Fuegos every time you're in Cusco. But then the mall opened, and so everyone would start going to Chili's or Papa John's. And so that's like, it kind of changed. Everyone used to go to Fuegos, but then everyone just goes to get American food now at the mall. People there in Cusco as well, they work a lot in construction. There's a lot of people that work in construction, a lot of people that work in transportation, and people that work in tourism more than anything. Like they're always building stuff or repairing stuff, and then the other people are off showing the tourists around Cusco. Like there's a ton of ruins just even in the city itself. Like you could go see ruins just right up the the hill right there next to you. If you just go hike it, you'll find something. Like that's how frequent the ruins are there, I guess you could say. There's just ruins all over the place. And in Cusco itself, there's a place called Sacsayhuaman. It's another big tourist destination, I guess you could say, with these huge rocks that they put together somehow without. And if you go and try and put like a coin in between the rocks, you can't even fit a coin in between them. They're like so perfectly fit. And I don't know how they could have done that back in the day, but everything is perfectly fit. You can't fit anything between any of these rocks, and they're bigger than any human I've ever seen. And so I don't know how they could have done anything like that, but you see a lot of amazing feats of engineering from the Incans themselves just in Cusco. And like you have no idea how they could have done any of it. It just doesn't make sense. My third area, it was only like an hour outside of Cusco. So everyone there that lived there, it was a small place as well. Like everyone would go back to Cusco. They drive to Cusco every day. They'd commute for work. And this little place, I don't even know why it really existed, because everyone would commute to Cusco. If they wanted anything, they'd go back to Cusco. And so I don't know why they'd live out here, but everyone lived out there to just commute every day. And I guess the main reason is because it's probably cheaper to live out there. I mean, housing was a lot cheaper as well than just being outside of Cusco. It's probably like 25 to 30 bucks for two people to live out there for a month. Other than that, it was a really small place. Like you'd only go there to get to other places. Like you'd pass through it to get to any other place you're going. It's just right on the outskirts of Cusco. But other than that, it's not too much different than Cusco, my third area, just to the fact that I was a little farther away from Cusco. Internet in general is slow. The fastest was in Cusco, where the bigger cities are, obviously. But sometimes it would take a really long time. Sometimes it was really hard to connect to the internet. At least in the smaller little towns I was in, it was harder to connect. But usually they have internet cafes all over the place. So if one wasn't working, you could usually find another one that's working at least a little bit better. But it usually took a while. And so it'd be kind of hard to read all your emails and kind of respond to them all within an hour, which is what we had. And so we'd usually just start writing people before we even read the emails, and we just print them out later. That was what every missionary did. A good memory from my area, my third area, what you run into most of the time on my mission are a lot of drunks. Like you'll just see them all over the place. And I remember there was this really funny guy. He was, I don't know when he wasn't drunk. Every time we'd see him, it'd be in the morning, noon, or night. He was always out of it. And every time he'd see us, he'd always be like, "Oh, brothers, how you doing? We gotta talk sometime." And we'd like try and talk to him every once in a while, and he'd be like, "Yeah, it'll be great. We'll talk sometime." And like he'd always say that, and then he'd just wander off. And like whenever we tried to actually talk to him about something, it was kind of hard because he wasn't paying attention. But he's always so friendly. Like you run into friendly drunks and really aggressive ones. So the friendly ones, they'll like try and shake your hand, and they'll talk to you for quite a while. If you don't just like kind of cut them off, they'll just keep talking and talking and talking and talking, and you'll be there for a while. The friendly ones, anyway. And I think that was one of the most random things I ran into in that area. Because then, like, sometimes he'd follow us back to our apartment, and like he'd bang on our door like, "Brothers, we have to talk right now," and we'd be like, "No, we can't talk right now. We gotta do some other stuff." And he just sometimes, so it's hard sometimes when we ran into him, just because he'd want to talk so much, and then he'd follow us back sometimes, or we just try not to lose him sometimes. They are Quechua people, and what they're called, Quechua. Like they don't really go by Incan. I don't think anyone really talks about being of Incan descent or anything like that. They usually talk about, because most of them are from Quechua descent, which is like a people that lived there before, and mostly everyone is of that descent. So like most people that are older speak that language as well, of Quechua, and it's really hard to understand. It's a lot different than Spanish, and it has a whole different structure. So it's like missionaries will learn a few words, a few phrases, but other than that, it's really hard to understand. And I think that's the only culture they come from. Mostly everyone is Quechua. Like that's the only thing I heard in Cusco itself. Like if you go to Puno, it's Aymara, which is just another culture itself, and they have their own language as well. But with both of these cultures, they're both kind of dying out, because only the older people, like, they kind of respect their cultures and they embrace it. But everyone that's younger, the younger generations, they don't really want to learn the language, or they don't want to be part of that culture. They kind of want to just leave it. and so a lot of it's dying out in Aymara and Quechua, and so their culture is changing, you could say. Mostly from what I saw would be the difference between the Quechua and the Aymara. Like I only served once in Puno, which is where Aymara is, and there the people are a lot colder. I guess you could say a lot more cold-hearted. They're not as kind, warm, or friendly as like the Quechua people, and that's one of the biggest differences I saw. Other than that, they have a lot of different food, like between the Quechua and between Aymara. Like Aymara has these nasty potatoes, these super rotten potatoes that they just let sit and rot for a while, and they'll cook it up for you, and you get to eat it. It's super chewy and really gross. Their food is, I don't like their food very much, of the Aymara, and it's just a lot different than the Quechua food. They use different meat, if it's like Aymara. Like they'll use a lot of alpaca and llama. Like that's what I ate a lot of there. And like the Quechua will use more beef, stuff like that. That's like the biggest change is the meat as well. Other cultural differences, I think those are the biggest ones that I was able to tell. And also, like, it made me think of another thing. Like the Incans themselves were in Cusco, and they owned mostly everything in my mission, except for one part where I served in Andahuaylas. There was another culture, you could say. They were called the Chancas, and they were like the most violent culture out of everyone. And so, like, even the Incans, even being so big and powerful, they could never overtake the Chancas, just because they were so small and so violent that they just couldn't beat them. And like the Chancas would wreck them every time they try and fight. And so I just thought that was interesting, that the Incans, even being so big, couldn't outtake this little tribe that was just so violent, so prideful of being themselves. I thought that was cool.